My parents pressured me to hand over my $5,000 inheritance to my sister's business. Then she flaunted her success. So I got my revenge. I, 17F, was forced to give away the money that I had inherited from my grandmother a couple of months ago to my older sister, so she could fund her business dreams. My older sister, Connie, is 6 years older than me and has always bullied me because she just seems to have something against me for no reason. The truth of the matter is that she bullies me because she can. She knows that she will get away with it like she always has, right from our childhood. My parents already told me not to make a big deal out of things, and whenever I would complain to them about Connie and her behavior towards me, they would tell me that I was being sensitive. It was now that I realized it was just my parents gaslighting me into believing that this was normal behavior by older siblings, and I have nothing to be upset about. But I can tell you guys for a fact that Connie was much worse than other older siblings because she was not messing around with me, and what she did to me was not harmless. Obviously, when we were very little, there was always her trying to put me down with her harsh words, and my parents telling me to shut up but never saying anything to her even though it was she who was making me cry. That was horrible in itself, but at least it was just verbal. But this particular incident that took place when I was 13 was what made me realize that she didn't just dislike me. She actually loved me so my family and I had driven to the beach and Connie had brought along a couple of her friends with her. She was 19 at the time and had come back from college for the weekend, so she and her friends were spending all their time together, and things had been particularly nasty for me because, for some reason, her friends seemed to hate me just as much as she did. I guess they were all suffering from the same kind of mental disorder that made them hate people who had done absolutely nothing to them. Anyway, they had constantly been putting me down, making cutting remarks about me and just giggling every time I was around. I had gotten sick of it, so I decided to take a break from them and was just sitting by myself alone on the pier with my feet dangling over the water. And then, all of a sudden, I felt a plastic bag being shoved over my head and somebody kicked me in the back, so I fell into the water. It took me a good couple of minutes to come to my senses and realize what was going on. And then I saw my sister and her friends running away laughing while I splashed around in the water. Thankfully, I'm a good swimmer, and as soon as I recovered from the shock of it all, I took the plastic bag off my head and swam back to the shore as fast as I could. It was the most troubling incident that has ever taken place with me, and when I got back to my parents and started crying about what had happened, my sister and her friends tried to pass it off as a harmless prank, but the worst was yet to come. My parents actually laughed along with them and said that I was just overreacting since I always had been a crybaby. They said that nothing would have happened to me, and my dad even made a joke about all those swimming lessons having finally paid off. The plastic bag that they had put over my head was pretty small, and I might have asphyxiated and died. Also, if I hadn't managed to come to my senses in time and taken that bag off my head, there was a chance that I might have drowned. So many things could have gone wrong, and yet, they seemed to find it all very funny. I already knew that my parents had a favorite daughter, and it's definitely not me, but that incident remained with me, and after that, I made up my mind that I was not going to treat any of these people like my family. My only goal was to study hard, get into a college, and then get away from these people because I absolutely could not afford to trust any of them. Since then, I have always maintained my distance from Connie, but unfortunately, I'm forced to live with my parents, so I can't exactly treat them the same way. I have had to act nice with them, and that was also part of the reason why I had to give away the money that I had inherited 3 months ago, even though I really didn't want to. My grandmother, who was my dad's mother, passed away about a year ago, and we finally received the inheritance 3 months ago. She left the house that she used to live in and most of the money that she had left to my parents, while Connie and I received $5,000 each, but I also received a sapphire ring that she owned since I had once told her that I really liked it, and she had joked about how I could have it once she was gone. It was a pretty big amount, and I planned on saving it for my future. But then, my parents told me that Connie was starting her own business, so she needed to put together all the money that she possibly could. They were already helping her, and now they were counting on me to do the same. I did not think that it was fair because it was her business, so why should I have to contribute? Also, let's not forget that she has always treated me with nothing but cruelty my entire life, and now, I was suddenly expected to help out this person. I refused, but after arguing with me for a couple of days, my dad told me that if I did not help her out, then he would not pay for my college tuition and wouldn't even allow me to come back home once I left. That scared me, and I was already very frustrated with the situation, so I ended up saying yes. It was probably not a good decision to make, but I was under a lot of pressure and I just didn't think it was worth it to keep fighting with these people, so I needed some peace and quiet, which is why, just to shut my parents up, I agreed to give up the inheritance that I had received. After all, they were allowing me to keep my ring. Probably because they did not know that it was a real sapphire, since in the will, my grandmother had only mentioned it as the ring with the blue stone, so I knew what she was talking about, and I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut since it was worth quite a lot, which turned out to be good for me. So I gave up the $5,000 that I had received from my grandmother and put an end to that argument. 3 months have passed since then, and I've been accepted to a college of my choice. I'm going to start in a couple of weeks. My parents are living up to the promise that they had made to me. They are going to bear all my expenses, like my tuition, and because I'm going to be living out of state, they're going to pay for all my expenses as well. I guess it was not that bad of an investment after all, to give up my $5,000, because now I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do about money when I'm in college. Everything has been going well for me and technically, it still is, but I feel very guilty about what I did because a couple of days back, my sister hosted a launch party since she has finally managed to open her store. She's working with the same people who she was friends with back in college. You know, the girls who pushed me into the sea with a plastic bag on my head and thought that it was hilarious. The three of them now own a massive shoes and accessories store and it's pretty basic stuff, but they think that they did something revolutionary since they believe that whatever they have come up with are really cute things. Anyway, do you have a lot of easement to agree with whatever they say? So their cronies are definitely going to be shopping from there and I already know it? There was a chance that my sister could have had a successful career ahead of her, but I kind of did something after she sent me a bunch of photos from the launch party to rub it in my face. I was obviously not invited to the event and when my parents left, they told me that the reason I was not invited was because it was an adults-only event, and since I was 17, they couldn't take me with them. It was a bunch of baloney, but I really didn't want to go anywhere. However, the day after the party, Connie sent me a bunch of photos and a text saying that since I had missed the fabulous party that she had hosted yesterday, she wanted me to live it through the photos. And then, just to be cocky, she said that she couldn't have done this without my help, referring to the $5,000 that I'd had to give up for her. I don't know why, it just got on my nerves, and then when I saw this guy who was in the photos, I immediately went to my gallery and confirmed my doubts. From the photos themselves, I could not tell if they were dating anymore or not since he was only in the background of a couple of pictures, but even though he had grown out some stubble and put on some weight, I could still tell that it was her high school ex-boyfriend. This guy, let's call him Simon, started dating her as soon as she turned 18 even though he himself was 25 at the time. He was from the same high school as the two of us, but of course, he had graduated way before Connie. They had struck up a friendship online when she was 16. He literally asked her out on the day of her 18th birthday, which I thought was pretty creepy, but Connie thought that it was romantic and thankfully, this was the time my parents acted like normal human beings and told her that they did not like the idea of her going out with somebody who had been waiting for her to turn 18 in spite of being in his 20s like a creep. They did not want her to go out with him, but I guess she did not obey them and continued to date him secretly. He was working in his dad's company at the time, but after a mere 8 months of being together, they had to break up because he was leaving to live with his uncle in Wyoming and work on the farm since apparently his father had caught him trying to steal from the company. She was devastated, and that was when our parents found out that she was still with him since she had come back home to beg my dad to get a job here, so he wouldn't have to do what his parents asked of him and allow himself to get shipped off to Wyoming and break things off with her. But my dad did not listen to her and forced her to block him everywhere and promise him that she would never speak to him again. Our house had been turned upside down that day because on one hand, Connie was begging our parents not to make her break up with him and promising them that he would be better, and on the other, my dad was yelling at her for not listening to them and getting involved with this guy who was clearly up to no good while my mother just kept crying. Obviously, nobody involved me in anything that day and I was told to stay in my room and not come out, but I had heard his name being thrown around a lot, so I decided to stalk him on social media, and when someone causes an uproar like that in your home, you don't forget their face that easily. So when I recognized him, lurking in the background of her photos, I instantly decided to get back at Connie. Because Connie and my parents didn't count me as part of the family, they had been pretty open while discussing the business around me. So I was also aware of the fact that while my own parents didn't need much convincing, her friends' parents hadn't been that easy to crack. They were mostly convincing their parents to invest in the business because I think finding other investors would prove to be a difficult task since all of them are so stupid and incompetent. But anyway, I knew for a fact that the last person who had been holding out on this business plan was one of her mother, who was a single parent and was skeptical about betting so much money on a store dedicated to nothing but shoes and accessories. She wanted her daughter to find a job, work for a couple of years, gain some experience, and then circle back to this so that she wouldn't end up in a bad investment situation, but Connie and her friends were determined to make this work. So Connie had been complaining about this woman a lot while she was at home, and ultimately, they had decided that they were going to make do with the money that they had for now, and later on if their business started taking off then their third friend's mother would also invest in the business. That was the deal that they had come up with, and for that, they had to make sure that the first few months of their business were a huge success since at the moment, they only had enough capital to go on for a couple of months, but after that, they would definitely need a second round of investment unless, by some miracle, they were able to do enough business to keep up on their own. But realistically, it was unlikely for a business model like to break even so early, especially when they were so small scale and the fashion market is not exactly easy to crack. I knew that the last parent who has been holding out even now needed just one excuse to back out of this deal, and I knew that this secret could do it. So I reached out to her through a fake account and asked her to call me because I had something important to share with her regarding her daughter's business. I made sure she called me using the Facebook call feature and didn't give her my number since I wanted to remain anonymous. I had to wait for a couple of hours, probably because she was not sure if this was legit or not, but I guess curiosity got the better of her and she eventually called me up. Then, I told her all about what I had seen and who the guy lurking in the background of all the photos actually was. She did not believe me initially, but then I was able to manage to tell her that my job was just to warn her. After this, it was entirely up to her whether she still wanted to invest in this business or not. Then I hung up on my own, sent her a couple of pictures of Connie and Simon from the past, and left it up to her to decide. I guess she decided to back out of it and even told her daughter to do the same because, since the day after I made that phone call, things have been intense. Nobody has any idea that I was behind all of this, but Connie has been calling our parents to try and get them to talk to the mother who backed out and convinced her to come back on board. Her friends are also pretty pissed at her because they can't believe that she didn't share something like this with them, and apparently she's back together with Simon, but she had lied about his identity so that nobody would recognize him. And even our parents are pretty displeased with her for this. To sum it up, she's screwed because literally everyone in her life is mad at her, and I really want to enjoy all of this, but for some reason I just can't bring myself to do that. I know that this business meant a great deal to her, and now I'm wondering if I was a little too petty and what I did might have been wrong. I overheard our parents discussing how disappointed they were a couple of hours ago, and even they were pissed at her and were considering exiting her business as investors because she had broken their trust. Then it really spelled trouble for her because they almost never get upset with her, so this is something extremely new. And I don't know, this just doesn't feel as good as I thought it would. So AITA for screwing over my sister by trying to get a potential investor to back out of her business because she bullied me as a kid. Update 1. Hey, thanks to everyone who bothered to respond to my post with their advice. I guess you guys are right, I might have had too much of a conscience to enjoy this, but I am doing the wise thing and keeping my mouth shut about what I did. Because if my parents ever found out that it was me behind all of this, they would literally throw me out of the house. And since I'm going to turn 18 in a couple of months, there's going to be nothing stopping them from doing that either. I'm relying on them to pay for my college expenses, so I really can't afford for that to happen. It's been a week since I made my post, and things have gotten much worse for Connie because the mother who had backed out of the deal convinced her daughter to do the same, and now it's just down to the two of them. But this other friend of hers is very upset with her and is demanding that they split the shares of the business 60-40 because her trust in Connie has greatly diminished after she found out about this secret boyfriend who stole from his father's company. To them, she had introduced Simon as this guy she had met on a dating app a couple of months back and had been with him ever since. But after her friend's mom revealed the truth, she was still trying to stick to that story, but nobody believed her anymore. She even tried to pass off the images as fake, saying that somebody might have photoshopped it to make her look like a liar. So she has been visiting our parents almost every single day, and they have been scolding her for what she did, but also are still trying to help her. Every evening, the three of them get together with their lawyer to try and figure out a way that she wouldn't end up losing her shares of the business. There is a pretty strong chance that they might have to shut down because of this disagreement if they are not able to resolve this conflict quickly, and I don't know how I will feel about that, but honestly, I have just made up my mind to avoid thinking about this at all. The only good thing that has come out of the situation is the fact that because Connie is in trouble, nobody really pays attention to me anymore, so I can come and go as I please, and I'm literally doing whatever I want. It is nice. It has really taken the spotlight off of me, and even when Connie visits, she just ignores me because she's too busy with her own situation, and my parents don't say anything to me either. So this is how I'm spending the last couple of weeks back at home before I leave for college, and it's been great so far. I don't have to answer to anybody about what I do throughout the day, and honestly I feel like even if I don't come back home for a couple of days and end up spending more time at my friend's place than at my own home, my parents and Connie are not even going to notice. Anyway, like I said, this is the one good thing that has come out of the situation, and I'm hoping that they leave me alone until I'm finally ready to go to college. I'm also keeping my fingers crossed that this situation, in no way, impacts my parents' decision to pay for my college expenses. Something that I hadn't considered earlier, but while typing out this post, it occurred to me. If it does, I'll be screwed, but at least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing that Connie has it worse than me. Update 2. So almost 2 weeks have passed since my original post, and up until last week, nothing had really happened involving me, so I thought I was safe, but I don't think so anymore. Anyway, a couple of days back, I guess the woman whom I had called finally gave in to the pressure and told Connie how exactly she had managed to find out about this past connection, and she didn't tell her the whole truth. But she just told Connie that she had received an anonymous phone call and a couple of photos from somebody, which is how she had found out. Connie is no longer bothering to hide the fact that she knew and used to be with him and didn't really end her relationship because at this point, nobody's really stupid and everybody has figured out that she did not meet him on any dating app and the pictures were real. And after she found out that there was an anonymous phone call involved, she obviously thought of me first. So yesterday, when she visited us, I had the misfortune of being downstairs because I had made plans to hang out with a friend and was just leaving. But then, she stormed into the house and shoved me as hard as she could as soon as she saw me. I lost my balance and my temper and shoved her right back. Then, she grabbed me by the hair and started screaming in my face, saying that she knew it had to be me who had made that phone call, and she was going to make sure that I paid the price for doing this. I was panicking, but I couldn't let it show on my face because otherwise, she might have figured out the truth, and I wanted to stick to the fact that it was not me. So I started yelling at her and I said that it wasn't me and that I wouldn't even know whom to talk to because I met her friend's parents only once, when they had all come over for lunch a couple of weeks before they opened the store. Of course, I was lying through my teeth, but I tried to make it sound as believable as I could. After a couple seconds of us screaming at each other, our parents intervened and finally got us to break apart. But then, Connie said that she did not believe a word of what I was saying, and she was sure that it was me who had screwed up her chances of having a career in business, and demanded that I allow her and my parents to go through my phone and laptop. I had mentally prepared myself because I knew that this was coming, but I still threw a fit about it because if I just agreed to it, that would seem suspicious. Anyway, I had nothing to be scared of because I had wiped all my devices clean of any evidence that could point towards me being the person who had made that anonymous phone call. Besides, Connie thought that I had made a phone call from my phone number and not a Facebook account that I had created specifically to contact her friend's mom and then deleted it. So she was way off in the first place, and even when she and my parents went through all my accounts on different social media platforms, they were able to find nothing. When she did not find any proof to substantiate her claims that it was me who had told her friends about her past with Simon, she completely freaked out at me and started yelling at me, saying that I had wiped all my devices on purpose, and she knew that it was me. I argued with her, saying that she had lost her mind just because she was going to lose her business, but she had no right to take it out on me. Eventually, things quietened down a bit, and she started crying. I thought I was in the clear, but it was then that my parents chose to talk to me and said that it was true that they couldn't find anything to prove that I was the one who had leaked this information. But nevertheless, they believed Connie because she seemed pretty sure of it, and besides, there was nobody else who could have known about this. Even though they had been at the party and had seen Simon but hadn't recognized him, so it literally could not have been them, and so that leaves just me because Connie had sent those pictures with Simon in the background to piss me off, and it was very obvious that I might have retaliated. And then, exactly what I had feared would happen, ended up happening. They told me that, even if they couldn't find any proof, they knew that it was me and were canceling their plan of paying for my college expenses. So now I was on my own and they did not want any further arguments about this. Then, it was my turn to start screaming and crying, but unfortunately, nobody cared about that since I was not Connie. After about half an hour of begging, screaming, and a lot of tears, and still no response from their end, I finally went back to my room and shut myself in, and started writing this update to distract myself. I still have the sapphire ring that my grandmother had left me and I could sell that, but I'm not sure if it would get me through all 3 years of college. So I'm just considering taking out a student loan and asking somebody from my family to become a cosigner because like I said, there's just a couple of weeks to go until the deadline for making the payment and I absolutely cannot risk anything. Even if I'm able to cover the first semester by selling the ring, I'm not sure about the rest and eventually, I'll have to figure something out. Update 3. Hey, so a lot of things have taken place since my last update. It's been a month since I posted and let me just start off by talking about what happened to me. So, I left my parents' place a couple of days after my last update because now, since they were not paying for me to go to college, I did not have any reason to stay with them or keep in touch. I packed my bags and left to go live with a friend of mine. I had already discussed things with her and she told me that I was welcome to come live with her and her family. She was taking a gap year and after living with her for a couple of days, she and her parents told me that she wanted to start working at her dad's business, so she really didn't have any interest in going to college in the first place. But her parents did have a college fund set aside for her, so I could use that for the time being. I tried to decline, but they convinced me since her parents had known me for a long time and said that it was as good as sending their own daughter to college. And honestly, I was in no position to say no to an offer like that, so I took them up on it, and even though I am sure that they don't expect me to pay them back, I'm going to make sure that I do. I am on campus right now and I didn't even have to sell my grandmother's ring, so I'm very grateful to my friend and her parents. And as for Connie, things didn't end too well for her because she ended up selling all the shares of the business and now, her friends own the store entirely. She had to cut her losses and leave because it had been established that nobody could really trust her anymore and unfortunately, my parents couldn't do anything about that since it was completely out of their control. She is probably upset about it because this entire thing was her idea in the first place, but I guess she should be relieved because I don't think the store is going to do well in the future anyway. Anyway, that's none of my business because I have no contact with them anymore. I'm just going to focus on my future now. Now on to the next story. Found out about my wife's Hawaii trip with her lover, framed them with contraband, informed the DEA, and saw their arrest at the airport. She got 5 years, he got 15. The morning was chaotic because our alarm clock didn't go off, thanks to a power cut overnight. This meant my wife and I had to hurry to get ready for work. She was in more of a hurry than I was, since my job starts at 9 a.m. and it's just a 15-minute drive from our house. Before heading out to work, my wife usually checks her email, but she was rushing and forgot to shut down her computer. As I was about to turn it off, I noticed an email she received a few days ago with the subject line "Aloha to a great time." Curiosity got the best of me and I opened it, only to discover that my wife was planning a trip to Hawaii with another man while I would be away on a 2-week business trip. This revelation hit me hard and left me feeling devastated. Let me provide some background. Kathy, my wife, and I were introduced by mutual friends over 12 years ago who believed we'd hit it off. Turns out we both valued fitness and a healthy lifestyle. Kathy worked as a yoga instructor and personal trainer, while I pursued a career in marketing at a mid-sized company, aspiring for growth. I have a passion for the outdoors, often engaging in activities like hiking, mountain biking, and running. We shared many hobbies and looked good as a couple. Kathy is 5 feet 6 inches tall, with long brown hair, brown eyes, and an attractive figure. I stand at 6 feet 3 inches, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an athletic physique. Was it love at first sight? No, but we developed a strong friendship that later blossomed into romance. Took a couple of years, but we eventually tied the knot, and I believed we were happy until now. However, after reading this email, I realized our marriage was facing serious challenges. Apparently, Kathy and this guy Gary had been secretly planning a romantic getaway for some time now. Despite knowing about my upcoming business trip, which was a significant opportunity for me and the company, she went ahead with it. I was gearing up for a 2-week business trip with some colleagues to secure big accounts. Landing these deals could mean a promotion and a nice pay raise. But now all I could focus on was this email in front of me. I started digging into her other emails to learn more about this Gary. Turns out, she had kept all their correspondence neatly filed under trips. Convenient, right? Kathy isn't tech-savvy, but I'm on computers all the time, so navigating through was easy for me. It was clear she'd been involved with this guy for the past 6 months. But why? I couldn't see any obvious signs of unhappiness. Our bed life was good, and we enjoyed each other's company. What led her into the arms of another man? My mind was racing, but I had to head to work. Before leaving, I made sure to copy all the emails onto a thumb drive to examine them later and maybe figure out more about Gary and why she did this. After shutting down her computer, I rushed off to work, consumed by thoughts of her and Gary. As I processed the shock of this revelation, anger welled up inside me, and I craved revenge on a grand scale. I'm not typically one for violence or seeking payback, but this situation was different. Her betrayal was unforgivable. I briefly pondered when and where it all began but decided it didn't matter. What I did want was to learn more about Gary and how I could make his life miserable. I didn't wish harm on him, although the thought did cross my mind. Instead, I wanted them both to experience a very public humiliation. However, I still needed to plan carefully. With 6 weeks ahead, I closed my office door at work and brainstormed. I needed more intel on Gary and the specifics of their trip. Then, an idea struck me on how to sabotage their plans and expose their affair in a way she couldn't deny. It was a bold plan, but I was determined to make her face the consequences. Throughout the day, I managed to get some real work done, but my mind kept circling back to my scheme. When it was time to leave, I stayed back in my office for over an hour, jotting down what I needed and how to get it. I also noted the risks involved in my plan. If things went south or I got caught, it could mean serious trouble, possibly even jail time. But I was willing to take that chance. To gather more intel on Gary, I knew I needed access to Kathy's email and computer. I considered downloading software to crack her passwords, but quickly realized that could leave a digital trail. If I wanted to pull this off without getting caught, I needed to be careful. So, I had to find a way to get what I needed without leaving any trace back to me. Over the next few days, I bought some disposable cell phones from different stores, paying with cash, and got a small laptop that I could use at places with free Wi-Fi. This way, my actions couldn't be traced back to my workplace or home. I also purchased several wireless video cameras and bugs to place around the house, hoping to catch her bringing this a-hole into our bed for some extramarital fun. The idea made my blood run cold, but maybe they'd talk about their upcoming trip, giving me the info I needed for my plan. As time went by, I tried my best to act normal around my wife, so she wouldn't suspect that I knew about her affair. It was tough, but after a few weeks, pretending became second nature. I'd smile at her lovingly while secretly seething at the thought of her being with another guy. I guess I missed my true calling as an actor. During this time, I reached out to some old friends using one of the disposable phones I bought, ensuring there'd be no connection back to me. My first call was to a college buddy I hadn't spoken to in over 14 years. Steve was a real party animal back then, the guy to go to for a good time. "Hey Tank, how've you been, man?" At first, Steve didn't remember, but after some reminiscing about our college parties, It all clicked for him. Hey Hank, yeah, it's all coming back to me now. Those were some good times. Huh? What have you been up to lately? I quickly filled him in on what I've been doing since college. He shared that things hadn't quite turned out the way he hoped, but he's hanging in there. So what's the reason for this call? It wasn't just about reminiscing. I had to be cautious about bringing up the real issue, so I suggested meeting in person. Look, I need some help, and I thought you might be the guy for the job. How about we grab lunch and chat about it? He hesitated for a moment, then agreed, saying, sure thing, anything for an old college buddy. We set up a meeting spot away from my workplace but close to his for a few days later. I was really counting on his help, as time was ticking away, and I didn't have anyone else to turn to. I'd also set up cameras and bugs in the bedroom and living room, thinking those were the spots where they'd likely talk and do other stuff. After the first week, nothing significant showed up on the recordings. I started to think maybe they were meeting at his place, as it might be less risky for their affair. But the following week told a different story. It appeared she brought Gary over to our place one late morning, and they spent over 2 hours having closeness in every possible position. It disgusted me to watch, but I had to endure it to see if they'd discuss their trip or reveal any useful details. Yet they didn't. The next week, I checked the cameras again and saw they were back, but this time not for closeness, they just talked about their upcoming trip, giving me the info I needed, the flight number and departure time. Listening in, I could hear the excitement in my wife's voice as they planned. I was beyond furious, even considering harming them, but I pushed that thought aside. I wanted them both to suffer for a long time. This revenge was going to haunt them for life, even into their graves. I imagined a day when my soon-to-be ex-wife, old and gray, lay on her deathbed, and I would come in with a smile, leaning over to tell her how I had ruined her Hawaii trip. I'd stand up, flash a smile at her as she gazed at me in shock, then turn and walk away. Now more determined than ever to succeed, I still had one risky task left to tackle. I finally learned more about Gary. He and my wife both work as personal trainers at the same health club. Turns out, he has a habit of pursuing other men's wives, but that's about to hit a rough patch. He lives close to the club in a small condo complex, so I decided to do some surveillance. I took a day off from work, telling my boss I had personal matters to handle before our business trip. With a digital camera equipped with a powerful zoom, I observed his place for a few hours. It was a basic 2-bedroom complex, and it seemed his neighbors were away during the day for work, with no security cameras in sight. This worked well for my covert plans. During my meeting with Steve, I felt anxious about what I had to ask him. It was the riskiest part of my plan, but if I could get what I needed, it would be worth it. When I spotted Steve entering the restaurant, I waved him over to the table where I was seated. It was tucked away in the back, and the place was fairly quiet with only a few customers having a late lunch. As he approached, he greeted me with a casual "long time no see, bro." I wasted no time and got straight to the point. Steve looked worse for wear, like he could have been an extra on The Walking Dead show. I wanted to keep it brief. If he couldn't assist me, I'd have to seek help elsewhere. We reminisced about our college days and the epic parties Steve used to throw. He was quite the party animal back then, but it seemed to have taken its toll on him. He appeared much older than his actual age, at least 15 years older. I needed to get to the point, so I asked him directly why I had invited him, to see if he or someone he knew could help me get some party favors for a private event I was planning. I passed him a list and asked if he could assist me. I assured him I'd compensate him for his help. Steve glanced at the list, initially looking surprised, but then he grinned. He agreed to help without hesitation, saying it sounded like an exciting party. He even asked if he could bring along an old college buddy. Relieved, I agreed, as long as he could get me the items on the list. I told him once he had everything, I'd provide the details for the party. Steve requested upfront cash to purchase the items, so I handed him an envelope with several $1,000s inside. He remarked on the scale of the party and confirmed the cash was more than enough. We arranged to meet the following week for the exchange, and I gave him my new cell phone number in case of any issues. With everything settled, we left the restaurant. It was crucial that everything went smoothly, as my wife and her lover were set to depart the day after I left for my trip. 2 weeks before my departure, I met with Steve, and he managed to procure everything I needed. All I needed to do was hide these items until the timing was perfect. 3 days before my trip, I left work early and checked my wife's packed suitcase. It was all set for her trip, the cheating woman. Carefully, I slipped a few surprises into her bag as a parting gift. I made sure to hide them well, so she wouldn't discover them while packing or unpacking. I wasn't aiming for her to find them anyway. Then, I embarked on another risky step, breaking into Gary's place. I knew his work schedule, so that wasn't a problem. However, I had never attempted anything like this before. I bought a lockpick set and learned from a book I found online. It's amazing what you can buy on the internet. I practiced on various locks at home and work, and I became quite skilled at it. Feeling confident, I told my boss I needed an extended lunch break and headed to Gary's condo with my lockpick set. I was surprised at how quickly I managed to pick the lock, getting inside his home in just over a minute. I focused on speed because I wanted to carry out my plan swiftly and leave no evidence behind. Wearing latex gloves, I headed straight to his bedroom where I found his packed bag ready for the trip. Just like I did with my wife's suitcase, I added a few travel gifts to his bag to make their trip memorable. After that, I went to the kitchen and found a can of coffee. I emptied the coffee into a mixing bowl, placed some packets at the bottom of the can, refilled it with coffee, and put it back where I found it, making sure everything looked undisturbed. With everything back in place, I left Gary's place and returned home. But I still had one more thing to do. A couple of days before my trip, I contacted a friend who had a cousin working with the TSA at the airport. I had all the details about my wife and Gary's flight. Now, it was about getting this info to the right person without revealing its source. I contacted my friend but had to be careful about how I explained where I got the info from. "Jack, I need a favor, but keep this info confidential," I said. I gave him the flight details and Gary's name but didn't mention my wife's. Jack agreed to pass it on to his cousin discreetly. I also got rid of all the cameras and bugs so no one could find them. And I left some surprises in Kathy's car to add to her troubles. The day before my trip, I decided to have a little fun at my wife's expense. When I got home from work, I sat down, looking upset. My wife noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" "Something went down at work today." "Yep, the clients we were supposed to meet pulled the plug on the meetings. So now I won't be jetting off on that trip, and the company's missing out on a big opportunity to grow," I joked. I saw the shock and worry on her face. That's when it hit me she was probably scheming to get me out of town, so she and Gary could have their Hawaii getaway. Can't they still send you and try to smooth things over with those clients? You and your team have put in so much time and effort on this project. It'd be a real shame to see all that hard work go to waste, she said, trying to guilt-trip me. That made me furious. How could she talk about shame when she had none? Her and Gary were about to pay big time. I chuckled and reassured her, "Just kidding, honey. The trip's still on, no worries." Relief washed over her face, and she grinned. "You had me going there for a second, so. Are you all packed?" "Yep, just gotta toss a few things in my carry-on, and I'm good to go. You won't miss me too much while I'm away. Will you? Do you have any plans? Maybe a girls' night out or something?" "Nah, nothing like that. I'll just be here, waiting for my dear hubby to come back," she said. God, I almost burst out laughing at that, but I was too mad. The next day, my wife drove me to the airport and dropped me off. I gave her a long, passionate kiss, my hands caressing her sweet face. It would be the last kiss I'd ever give her, so I wanted it to be memorable. I joined the rest of the group, and we boarded the flight. It was a smooth ride, and once we landed and checked into the hotel, I called home, using the hotel room phone. No one picked up, so I left a message. "I left my phone in the cab and won't be able to call you until I get it back or get a new one. If you need me, leave a message at the front desk, and I'll call you later." I hadn't actually forgotten my phone. I just needed an excuse not to take her calls. The next day arrived, and I made sure to turn off my phone. I wouldn't be disturbed during my meetings with clients. When I got back to my hotel room, I checked for messages, but there were none. So, I turned on my phone and found no messages from my wife or anyone else. Well, maybe they managed to pass through airport security. The following day, the meetings went even better than the first ones, and we returned to the hotel early. There were several messages waiting for me on the hotel room phone. One was from my wife, another from her father, and the third from a DEA agent, which made me smile. I then checked my cell phone and saw several messages waiting for me. I listened to the messages on the hotel phone. The first was from my wife and she was crying. "Baby, it's me. I'm in big trouble and I really need you. Please come home now. Please." After that, all I heard was crying. The next message was from my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law. "Hank, your wife has been trying to get in touch with you. She's been arrested and needs you home now. Please give me a call when you have a chance." The final message was from a DEA agent named DeFranco. He identified himself as Agent DeFranco and wanted to discuss my wife's arrest on pills charges. He provided his contact information and some other details. I was thrilled and couldn't stop smiling, but I had to maintain serious demeanor around my colleagues. Everything had gone according to plan so far, but I still needed to act surprised and shocked to avoid suspicion that I was involved. The next morning, I contacted my boss and informed him of a serious family issue without providing specifics. He agreed to let me leave the meetings temporarily to handle the emergency, but stressed the importance of returning promptly to finalize deals with the clients. I caught the first flight back home, and upon landing, I retrieved my lost cell phone and called my father-in-law. "What's happening?" I received your message, but I can't believe it. Kathy was arrested on pills charges? She does not use any substance. Did this happen at the health club? I knew exactly where the incident occurred. No, she was traveling with a friend to Hawaii and they were stopped at security where they found some illegal things on her and her friend. Her father said in a low voice, sounding embarrassed. Hold on a second, just hold on. She told me she was going to be home and didn't have any plans. Who was this friend she was going to Hawaii with? I bet one of her girlfriends talked her into going and got her into all this mess, I replied. Her father hesitated for a moment. I know it was with someone else. The important thing to remember here, Hank, is that she's in trouble and needs your help. She loves you, and I know you love her too, he said. I interrupted him. What aren't you telling me, Dad? Who was she traveling with? I yelled into the phone, feeling a bit too satisfied. There was silence. Then he cleared his throat. She was traveling with a man, Gary somebody. He has been arrested too, he admitted. Once again, I interrupted him. So you're telling me my wife, your daughter, was flying off to Hawaii with another man while I was out working hard to earn a living, and she gets busted for pills possession. Is that what you're telling me? I demanded. Yes. I'm afraid that's what I'm telling you, he responded. I took a long pause. Okay, I need to talk to her lawyer and then this DEA agent, and after that I'm going to talk to her. We'll see what happens next, but she better have a darn good explanation for why she was about to go to Hawaii with another man and had substance with her, I thought to myself. I hung up on her father before he could respond. When I got home, I saw there were over 20 messages waiting, so I began to play them back. The first one was from me about losing my cell phone. The next few were from Kathy, hoping I would check our messages while I was on my business trip. Several were from her father, and the rest were from her lawyer asking me to get in touch as soon as possible. I called the lawyer, and since he wasn't in the office at that time, I made an appointment for the following morning. Next, I called the DA agent DeFranco and agreed to meet him at his office downtown later that afternoon. I quickly got cleaned up and headed out, all the while trying to think if I had covered my tracks so none of this could come back to me. Soon, I found myself in what I can only assume was an interrogation room. Agent DeFranco walked in carrying a folder. Glad you were able to stop by and see me, he said. I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer, he said, looking at something in the folder. Listen, my wife isn't involved with substance. As far as I've known her, she's never taken anything illegal. Honestly, she doesn't even drink that much. This has to be a big misunderstanding or a mistake. She's a yoga instructor, for crying out loud. Why would she be involved with illegal things? I was trying to act a bit, but Agent DeFranco didn't look up. People make all sorts of dumb choices for all sorts of dumb reasons. Now, did you know your wife was going to Hawaii with this guy, Gary? She told us he was just a friend, but Gary claims they were going for a romantic getaway. So, do you know Gary? Were you aware that your wife was having an affair? Did you have any idea about the substance? Now he was staring at me intensely. I took a deep breath to steady myself. I didn't know any of this until I spoke with my father-in-law this morning, but I still can't believe it. She must have been manipulated into this. She's too good of a person to get mixed up in something like this. I didn't want to push it too far. I figured this guy could spot a liar right away, so I had to tread carefully. Well, I guess you didn't know. Hate to break it to you, buddy, but your wife was cheating on you with an illegal seller, of all people. We've already searched his place and found even more pills, and soon we'll be searching your home too. You can either cooperate and let us in, or we'll just get a search warrant. Either way, we'll be searching your place soon. I knew her lawyer would advise against it, but this was about protecting myself. And it would look better if I wasn't trying to hide anything. So I agreed, and soon I was back at the house with dozens of DEA and FBI agents, along with a couple of their dogs going through everything. They took a few things, including some pill containers she kept in the medicine cabinet. The following day, during my meeting with Kathy's lawyer, I briefed him on my talk with DeFranco and the search. He wasn't pleased. If you're approached by any law enforcement, I want to be there before you say anything. Got it? I nodded, feeling irritated. Let me be clear, I told him. I want to know everything that led to my wife's arrest. All I know is she was about to fly to Hawaii with this guy Gary. If either of you wants my help, someone better start explaining how this happened. Do I make myself clear? He responded, I can't discuss your wife's case with you. That's when I walked out. Next, I headed to the jail where she was held and requested to see her. In a room with other inmates meeting with family or lawyers at round metal tables, bolted down stools, she came in, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, no makeup, her hair pulled back into a tight, messy ponytail. She appeared exhausted, like she hadn't slept for days. Oh, baby, I'm so relieved you're here, she sobbed. I was going to hug her, but a guard intervened, saying there could be no physical contact. This only made her cry harder. It's okay, honey, we'll figure this mess out. Right now, I need to hear your side of the story. How did you end up about to go to Hawaii with this guy? I asked calmly. Her tears increased. Hank, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So it's true. You were having an affair with this guy, Gary, a pill seller. How could you? Weren't you happy with me? Don't you love me? I just don't get it, him, you, and the pills. What were you thinking? I paused, knowing she didn't have an answer. Please believe me when I say I've always loved you. Can you forgive me? She pleaded with me. I looked at her for a while, then spoke up. Maybe I could have forgiven you, but you broke my heart completely. So I can't forgive you. When I leave here, I'm getting a divorce lawyer and changing all the locks on the house. I'm sending all your stuff to your parents' place because I want to erase every trace of you from my home. You're out of my life now. I don't want anything to do with you. And tell your lawyer not to use me as a character witness because I won't say anything good about you. Farewell, Kathy. I wish you the best. She was sobbing and pleading for me to stay, saying she needed me. Without looking back, I headed home and began packing her belongings. The next day, I hired a locksmith to change all the locks. Then, I scheduled a security company to install a high-quality system the following week. In just a few days, I had most of her things packed and ready to be sent to her parents' house. I received several calls from Kathy, but I ignored them all. I had no interest in talking to her. Eventually, I went back to work, and we successfully signed those important clients we had been chasing. This led to my promotion and a salary increase. Divorcing Kathy was smooth. It was a straightforward split with no spousal support, and she had to cover her legal fees from her palace arrest. Despite her attempts to reach me, I wanted to keep my distance. She didn't go to trial due to overwhelming evidence, and her lawyer advised her to take a plea deal for a shorter sentence. She wasn't pleased. On the other hand, Gary fought hard to prove his innocence but ended up with a 15-year sentence, while Kathy got 5 years. It was the day of Kathy's sentencing, and she wanted to meet me one last time before going to court. I agreed, and we met at her lawyer's office an hour before her court appearance. She appeared teary-eyed when she looked at me. Hank, I just want you to know that Gary meant nothing to me. It's you I've always loved and will continue to love. I'm truly sorry for hurting you like this. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. I hope you can forgive me someday, she said, almost in tears again. Kathy, I need to understand one thing. Why did you do it? Were you bored? Did I not satisfy you in bed? Was it the thrill of doing something wrong and getting away with it? What was it that led you to do this and ruin our marriage? I asked with sadness. She looked at me. I honestly don't know why. Maybe it was the excitement of doing something forbidden, but I've always loved you. I guess you didn't love me enough or else you wouldn't have done this, she replied. Kathy, I hope this is the last time I have to deal with you. I don't want to see or hear from you ever again. I want you to spend your time in prison thinking about what you've lost because you craved excitement. I bet you'll have some thrilling experiences in there once those ladies notice you. She began crying again, but this time out of fear. Over the next few years, the company grew, and I climbed up to become a VP. We expanded our business, opening an office in New York, and I was selected to lead it. This meant selling my house, moving to Manhattan, and getting an apartment. I received a few letters from Kathy early on, but I sent them back without opening. That part of my life was over, and I was ready to move forward. It's been 7 years now, and life in New York has been good. I'm still single, and the dating scene in New York is treating me well. I was still single, dating a different woman every few months. I had no interest in getting married again and risking betrayal. Once was more than enough. While sitting in my office, I got a call from the lobby, and my assistant Amy came in. She said there's a woman downstairs who wants to speak with me. She claims her name is Kathy. I paused for a moment, then told her to send Kathy up but to have 2 security guards nearby. I also gave Amy something to do for me. I wrote it down and handed it to her. Call me a few minutes after you bring her in, I said. Amy read what I wrote and smiled. A few minutes later, Kathy was in my office. She looked at least 10 years older and had gained some weight, not in a flattering way. Her once beautiful long brown hair now showed some gray and was frayed. I noticed the bags under her sad-looking eyes. Her clothes were stylish but conservative and seemed a bit outdated. I looked at her, feeling nothing, no love, no hate, not even pity. I was just emotionally empty. So, Kathy, what brings you here? Hank, I was hoping to talk to you. I felt the urge to explain what happened to me. Honestly, I had no clue about the substance, and I still don't know how they ended up in my bags. Gary must have sneaked them in without my knowledge. I'm not into substance, never have been. Please believe me. I'm begging you. Kathy pleaded with me. Kathy, you destroyed our marriage for a fling and made our whole relationship a lie. Why should I trust you now? Why did you go out of your way to find me just to tell me another lie? You don't get it. I love you. I still do. I want us to be together again. I want to make things right. Just then, my desk phone rang, and I put it on speaker. Yes, Amy, what's up? Stacy called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening as her parents are coming into town and then want to meet you. Let her know that I'll buy 4 tickets. Also, find out where her parents are staying. I want to send her mother a dozen roses. I ended the call and looked back at Kathy. You were saying? Kathy was on the verge of tears. Who's Stacy? Oh, she's just someone I've been seeing lately. But you're not here to talk about my dating life. You mentioned you still have feelings for me. While I appreciate that, I want to make it clear that I don't feel the same way about you anymore. At the end of the day, your dad informed me about your arrest and your plan to go to Hawaii with Gary. When your affair came to light, I was done with our relationship. Now please go, and I don't want to see you again. Do you understand? I listened carefully, but I had nothing to do with those pills they found. I was framed. Enough with your lies, Kathy. You cheated on me before and you're still lying now. Please leave and don't come back. I've told security to have you arrested if you return. Do you understand? She was crying silently, but she nodded. I escorted her to the door, and the security guards escorted her out. Amy came in afterward. What was that all about? Oh, that was just me saying goodbye to a chapter of my life.